Good afternoon to everyone. Let me start by a question. Who are we? You know, in the entrance of the conference hall, it's written, everyone is looking for new things all the time. And actually, I'm not sure it's true. I believe that maybe here in this room, we are all looking for new things. We are curious. And actually, we find our balance into the unknown. But so many people in life don't trust life at all. So many people are afraid of the unknown, afraid of the doubts, afraid of the question marks. So what do? They try to find completely other tools than curiosity. They try to find control, power, speed, because this helps them to fight against the doubts and the question marks. This helps them to fight against the uncertainty, against the changes, against everything that can threaten their comfort zone. So what I love so much in ballooning, actually, is the fact that when you fly a balloon, you learn exactly the other thing, exactly the opposite, exactly the contrary. You learn to have no power because you have no engine. You learn to have no control because you're pushed by the wind. And you learn to also not even have your own speed and direction because you go with the wind in the direction and the speed of the wind toward the unknown. So you have to understand that a balloon flight is a permanent crisis management because you know exactly where you come from, but you have absolutely no idea where you go to. A little bit like in life. In life, we also have all these dreams, goals, objectives, targets, visions. And how often, honestly, can we really reach them? Well, the interest in ballooning is the fact that when you are going in the wrong direction with your balloon, you can do something. Because you learn that the atmosphere is made out of several different layers of wind, which all have a different direction and a different speed. So if the wing is wrong, your only freedom, your only responsibility is to change altitude. Change altitude in order to find better winds that have a better direction. So instead of trying to fight horizontally, you can try to move up and down to go left and right. And I believe this is one of the tools we need in life if we want to teach others to be curious, to be innovators, to be pioneers and explorers. We have to learn how to change altitude in the winds of life, psychologically, philosophically, spiritually, of course, also. Not to forget socially, professionally, educationally. But for this, of course, we have to be practical. If I'm just standing here to say, oh, we have to change altitude in the winds of life to find better directions, probably the people who invited me here would think, wow, that's a little theoretical, maybe poetical, but useless, really useless. So let's be practical. If you want to change altitude in a balloon, what do? Well, you drop ballast. You throw overboard everything that you don't need anymore. It can be old equipment. It can be empty fuel tanks. It can be water, reserves of food. It can be bags of sand. Everything that can help you to be lighter and to climb. And I believe this is exactly what we have to learn in life. Drop ballast. Because if we read the checklist of our life, we see that we have a huge lot of ballast on board. Certitudes, safety, habits, convictions, exclamation marks, paradigms, dogmas, common assumptions. Well, all these things that usually we hold in our hands very strongly because we believe it makes us stronger. But it's not true, it doesn't make us stronger, it just makes us heavier. And if we want to be able to catch the right directions in life, to get the right influence, to get the right solutions, the right answers, the right strategies, we need to throw this overboard. And what does it mean very practically? It means that we have to be honest enough with ourselves to analyze what we deeply believe and try exactly the opposite. Maybe if you remember one sentence of my speech, it could be this one. If we want to be creative, if we want to solve a crisis, if we want to invent, if we want to be curious, we need to analyze very honestly what we deeply believe and try exactly the opposite. I'm not saying the opposite will always be better. What I'm saying is that instead of being always in one line, in one dimension, in one direction, when we imagine that the opposite maybe could be achieved, then we have a huge bunch of different strategies, opportunities, and tools. And if we do that, what will be the future at every second? The future will be all the lines going in every possible direction at every possible altitude in 3 dimensions. Of course, we never know where these lines are going. And this is exploration. Exploration is not just the North Pole and the South Pole. It's also life itself. And when I flew around the world nonstop with Brian Jones in 1999, I was so surprised to see that at the end, what was the goal I was looking for started to be only a step to do something else. And this picture wasn't there to show you our smile because we were the winners. No, it's there to show you what's left in the last fuel tank in terms of propane, liquid propane. We took off with 3,700 kilos, almost 8,000 pounds of liquid propane. We landed with 80 pounds. Almost a failure, just enough to succeed. And this is when I really felt in my guts what it means to be dependent on fossil energy. Not a theory, because when you're out of fuel in a balloon, you just fall down from the sky. And then I started to think, okay, for the next time I fly around the world, I don't want to be dependent on fuel anymore. I want to be able to fly forever, with no limits. And when the capsule of my balloon was finally brought to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, together with the big milestones of aviation, I started to reflect about all these big achievements of the 20th century. And it became obvious for me that nothing was a new idea. Nothing. Flying, climbing the highest mountains, going to the stratosphere, nothing was a new idea. No, everything was just a dream of humankind for thousands of years. But it was never achieved because the mythology was saying that only the gods were allowed to fly, only the gods were allowed to sit on the highest mountains. So why were all these big achievements happening in the 20th century? Because people started to throw out all the ballast, throw overboard all the ballast of the paradigms and the common assumptions, and started just to achieve things that were considered to be impossible, but actually were completely possible. So what is left in the future in terms of pioneering spirit if we want to continue the curiosity of exploring life in the future? Well, the planet has been explored and conquered. So maybe now we can do something else. Maybe at another altitude, something like improving the quality of life of humankind, fighting poverty, achieving sustainability, technologies to save the natural resources of our planet. And this is when started for me this vision of a zero-fuel airplane. An airplane who could fly day and night without a single drop of fuel, with just the sun giving enough energy on the wings to run electrical motors and load the batteries in order to have this plane flying during the day and flying during the night. So the plane exists, and André, in a couple of minutes, will explain you how it was built. A plane bigger and lighter than anything in the past. But the symbol of it is so important. If this airplane is too heavy, if the technologies are not optimized, if it uses too much energy, if the pilot flies in an unsustainable way or unstable way, it will use too much energy, and the plane will crash before the end of the night with empty batteries. But if you think it's exactly what happens for our world, if we don't implement the technologies to protect the natural resources of our planet, if we don't manage to save energy, to act sustainable, we will never transmit the planet to the next generation without a major crash. So the technologies that we use on Solar Impulse are technologies that can be used everywhere. And in a rough calculation, you can say that if the same technologies were really implemented on a global scale, already today we could divide by 2 the energy consumption of the world and produce half of the rest with renewable sources. And actually, this is exactly what we stand for with André and with our entire team at Solar Impulse. Demonstrate what these technologies can do. So we have been doing a lot of flight missions over Europe, invited by the European Parliament to try to fight against the skeptical people who try to get back in the past in terms of old technologies, oil-consuming engines and things like that. The year later, we were invited by the King of Morocco to promote the biggest solar power program in the world in the south of Marrakesh. And this year, we had the honor of crossing the United States from San Francisco to New York. But it could be André flying, it could be me flying. At the end, the goal is really to catch the awareness of the media, catch the awareness of the political world, in order to really be an ambassador for renewable energy, an ambassador for all these clean technologies. And for years and years, it has been so boring to speak about protection of the environment that was expensive and too much CO2 and nobody knew what to do with the CO2. I think we have to make it exciting. We have to inspire people. I believe that the greatest adventure we can achieve is clearly this adventure of sustainability, where we simultaneously protect the environment and create jobs and bring new products on the market and sustain growth of the industry. And maybe like this, the people themselves will be inspired also in terms of exploration and in terms of pioneering spirit. Because how many of these people who are watching our airplane flying really understand that they can do the same in their own life, in terms of technology, but also in terms of spirit? You know, for some people, life is easy. It's transparent. You look out the window and you see the view. For a lot of people, it's the other way around. It's like on this other picture that I took during the balloon flight around the world. You know, this is a porthole of the capsule. It's frozen by the moisture of the night. And on the other side, you have a rising sun. Well, very often, we have to go through the ice to find the light. And if we are not curious enough, we'll never do it. And what's the result? So many people will tell you it's better to suffer in the ice we know rather than to take the risk of going through the ice. So if we want to inspire people, if we want to really bring them to be curious, to be pioneers, we have to help them. And I believe that's our responsibility. We're a privileged group of people here, and we have to show to the rest of the world that they can do the same, that they can be the same, that they can reach the same results if they manage to throw some ballast overboard, change altitude, and be influenced by better winds in life. Good luck to all.
Good afternoon to everyone. So what's so special with this Solar Impulse airplane? What's really special is that this is the first and only airplane in the world which has an unlimited endurance. Can fly day and night, many days in a row, even weeks. And why can we do that? Two reasons. Well, the first one is that we collect the energy directly on the airplane from the sun, and we don't have to embark any energy from the ground. And second, I think even more important, this is the most energy efficient airplane ever built. To be able to fly day and night, we had to drastically reduce the energy consumption of the airplane. And when we did the feasibility study, that's already 10 years ago, we quickly understood that the project was not just building a new airplane, but really about energy savings. And so this word efficiency became the driving dimension of the entire project. And when we talk about efficiency, of course we talk about aerodynamic efficiency. That's why, in fact, this airplane is so big. The size of a 747, the wingspan of a 747, gives more lift, less drag, more benefit, less losses, just simply less energy to fly. And when you have this surface, of course, you can integrate a lot of energy, a lot of solar cells. about 2,000 square feet. And if you calculate how much energy you can collect through an entire day, and you average this energy over 24 hours, because we fly day and night, now the power we have available is the power of a scooter. So if you take physics, mathematics, aerodynamics, you can of course calculate how much weight you can carry in this airplane. And the maximum weight we could afford is the weight of a car. So that's what the starting point, building an airplane of the size of a 747, but with a weight not exceeding the weight of a car. And of course, our first reaction with Bertrand was to go to the airplane manufacturers, sailplane manufacturers, I mean, the people who know how to build very light. And their reaction was very straightforward. They told us, your project is impossible. And so we decided to develop our own solution. So what we had was a very clear vision to fly around the world with a solar-powered airplane. I think we had a clear idea. That was to build one of the largest, or an airplane of the size of a very large transport airplane with a very low weight. And also we had a very clear purpose. Demonstrate that existing technologies can save energy. And if we can do it in an airplane, we should be able to do it on the ground. It's interesting also to see that I think we had three advantages when we started the project. The first one was that we had no cash. It's quite obvious for a startup, but in our case, I think was helpful because it was helpful not to push us in the first design solution that we could have found. Why? Because we had the second advantage. We had no idea about how to build an airplane. Bertrand is a medical doctor. I am an entrepreneur, engineering background, but no experience in the aviation world. The example to illustrate that is, the company that we choose to manufacture the biggest structure part of the airplane. The company specialized in boat building, never did any work for the aviation world. But I guess maybe the advantage was, unlike the aviation industry, they didn't know that this project was impossible. Well, the third advantage was that we had no infrastructure, no team. So we had the choice, in fact, to develop our own strategy. And the team was crucial. And I focused really on two characteristics. I mean, the first one was to try to get really independent-minded people. And of course, the second one was to get the best talents. But what I ended with was a very diversified team, different cultures, different languages, different backgrounds, different educations. I mean, it was not a team. I mean, I ended up with a group of people. And I spent, I think, the first 2 years really doing mostly conflict resolution, trying to build bridges between these people and help them to communicate. I think if I develop a new activity today, it would be around couple therapy. The third thing which was important to do was to develop the right corporate culture, I mean the right philosophy. And in our case was never to be satisfied with the first solution. And we knew that we had to push the limits to get to this very low weight. And I mean, in aviation, you can't cheat. If the airplane is too heavy, it doesn't fly. In our case, if the airplane was slightly too heavy, we couldn't make it through the night. Every part that we do, of course, are calculated. I mean, if you take the ribs of the wing, that's a very good example. And then they are mechanically tested. And when you do a mechanical test, normally, if it doesn't break, you are very happy. In our case, we were not, because it meant that potentially they were too heavy. So it was brought back to the design board until we got, in fact, the right solution there. And that's how we could build this airplane. That's how we could fly day and night in 2010, fly to Paris, to Brussels, and this year to bring this airplane to the United States and do the flight from San Francisco to New York. But now we have to build a second airplane. The airplane that you have seen is a test airplane. It's a flying laboratory, if I can put it this way. To do the flight around the world, which is scheduled in 2015, we need an airplane which is able to travel, which is reliable, as we need to cross oceans, and this crossing will take many days, many nights. So we have to push the limits further. And we have built the second wing, or the wing of this second airplane. What you see here is what we call the main spar of the wing. That's really the backbone of the airplane. It's 1 year of design, it's 1 year of construction, 15 people, 60 Q cycles, so it looks very simple, but it's extremely complex. And this ultimately also has to be tested to check the quality. And the test is extremely I would say difficult and highs very big suspense. You can see from the face of the lead engineer what the tension can be. We hear some small cracks. We are about 50% of the load, and he's really worried. And in some ways, he's right to be worried, because when we reach 100%, that's exactly what happened, a huge shock. And these big parts of 240 feet literally explodes. So a major shock, of course, for us and for the engineers, because immediately you understand that you have 1 year of delay with all the financial associated costs. But at the same time, we also discovered that there's an opportunity to learn, of course, about technologies, an opportunity to learn about the team behavior, and how to use, in fact, such a problem to bring the team even more together and develop further the team spirit. The other opportunity was at the project level. You know, we started by saying we lost a year. And instead of saying we lost a year, we're starting to understand that we gained a year. We had 1 more year available. And we could use this year to bring this airplane to the United States, which we did, to do the flight from San Francisco to New York, what the pioneers used to do in the early part of the last century. And I think I believe it would have been difficult to do the flight around the world, scheduled in 18 months, if we would not have done this flight across USA. We gained so much experience out of it. I'm often asked, what is it to fly this airplane? I can tell you it's absolutely fantastic. Can you imagine that you can take off with empty batteries? You can climb to 30,000 feet, the altitude of the airliners. You can fly the entire day. And at the same time, you can fill up the batteries. So in the evening, you have the choice. Either you land and you give this energy to the grid, or you continue through the night, and day after day, therefore. But when you fly so long, people ask us, how is it, to be in a small cockpit for 24 hours? And our answer is to say, we enjoy the present moment. And in some ways, that's true, because if you start to calculate how many hours are left, 23, 22, 21, 20, I tell you, it's a real nightmare. And let me share with you one experience I had during the last flight we did from Washington to New York this summer. Took off at 5 o'clock in the morning. The plan was to land at 2 o'clock at JFK. At midday, or just after midday, a helicopter came to make some pictures. And the helicopter told me immediately that I was losing part of the undercover of the wing. Potentially major problem. Shock for me, of course, but it was even worsened when the picture was sent to the engineers, and the comments from the engineers was that they were surprised that the wing did not disintegrate yet. So I was remembering, what I was telling the entire morning. We have a lot of interviews from the cockpit with different medias, and I was saying all the time, what's great in this airplane is that we have the time, and we have the time to enjoy the present moment. And what I did was to go through the worst scenario, which was the disintegration of the airplane and a forced bailout. How to get out, how to jettison the cockpit, how to jump out of the airplane, how to open the parachute, how to get in the water, how to get rid of the parachute. And I felt suddenly that I was prepared. And I told myself, if you have to do that, you better enjoy it, because you will not have another chance for that. And when I did that, interestingly, I became very serene and very calm, up to the landing at JFK. And I'm part of the small group of people who love JFK compared to some other people we heard this morning. But what I learned from that is that, going through the most difficult scenario, step by step, in detail, really took my anxiety away and brought back the confidence I needed to complete the voyage. Thank you very much.
Bertrand has one thing to say before I say that.
Just a little note to explain you why we have this jacket today. It's the last time we're wearing this jacket without the name of Google, because we're announcing today a high-level partnership for the airplane that's going to fly around the world with the tools of Google in order to help us to communicate our message much further to the political world, the university world, and the public. So from now on, it's going to be google.com Solar Impulse. Thank you to everyone.